We come in to the second last health principle on the health reformer program, and it's called eating healthy. I want to start by saying that I do not believe that this is the pinnacle of all principles. Some people tend to think that if they eat healthy, they're pretty much all right. I have seen many people that they eat the right stuff, but they're not healthy. They do not look healthy. They do not do any exercise. The only thing that they do, they eat healthy, but nothing else. And one does not work above the others. All of these health principles need to be established one by one, and all of them at the same time, with having a confidence and a trust in God above all things. Because at the end of the day, He is the one that set down these principles for us. So in this eating healthy section, we are going to find the biblical principle found in Genesis 1:29, when it says that God said, "This will be your food, every seed-bearing plant and from the ground, and every seed-bearing fruit from the trees." In other words, God's original plan was for human beings to be fed with a vegetarian diet. What actually happened, as you read along in the Bible, that the wickedness of man became so great that the earth was destroyed by a universal flood. If you want to see the evidences of the universal flood, you only need to look at a picture from the satellite of the earth. It looks fairly much blue, almost covered by water. And from then on, it was given permission, man was given permission, or it was made provision for man to introduce meat into their diet. But meat was not to be used continuously right forever. At the end of the day, the principle behind it was whatever is good, put inside your body, but whatever is bad, don't use it in your body. And as we said before in the section of temperance, the use of meat nowadays has become a fairly dangerous business. But is the scientific data backing up the Bible, or is the scientific world backing up God? We are going to see that many lines of scientific evidence demonstrate that the optimal diet for heart disease prevention is the total vegetarian diet. The Beijing Olympics in China last year was recording the biggest number of vegetarian athletes, or at the same time, semi-vegetarian athletes. The performance of those athletes were tested, and the evidences were such that everybody was wondering why these athletes were performing so high on only vegetables, fruits, and grains. The answer is very simple. It's God's plan. He knows what He's doing with the human body, and He knows that what the fuel for that human body, what is the optimum fuel for that human body. Scandinavian researchers placed individuals with severe rheumatoid arthritis on a total vegetarian diet for an entire year. After a single month on this dietary program, they analyzed the patients and found a decreased number of tender and swollen joints. Their grip strength was better. Their problems with severe joint stiffness in the mornings had improved. We actually mentioned before that meat eating causes inflammation in the joints. So this really makes sense. This other study indicates that meat increases the risk of lymph gland cancer. This study says that a meat diet has a strong connection with colon cancer. Eating meat increases breast cancer risk, according to this study. Eating meat increases prostate cancer risk. Eating meat increases ovarian cancer risk. Cholesterol is linked to cancer, and we know where the highest amount of bad cholesterol comes from meat products or animal products. Dairy products link to cancer also. Now, if meat and animal products are linked to cancer, the opposite is also true. If you go into a vegetarian diet, you enter entering into a diet that is preventive of cancer. Now, how many millions of dollars are put forward every year for research in order to discover the cure for cancer? There was a little town that had a big cliff. And from that cliff, every so often, men will actually fall down from that cliff. And as they arrive to the bottom end, they will either die or they will be severely injured. So the government of that town decided to put millions and millions and millions of dollars to improve the situation. So what they did is they provided with ambulances, they provided with hospitals, they provided with researchers in order to, when the people were arriving to the bottom, that they will pick them up so quickly that hopefully they will have a chance at the time they arrive to the hospital. So the quicker the transportation was, the more chances they will have of survival. Until the time that someone looked up the cliff and decided to fence it out, to put a fence around it. Prevention is much better than cure. If we have seen the evidences of what a wrong lifestyle is causing, why waiting at the other end to give a solution when the solution is right at the beginning? A vegetarian diet has been proven to be the optimal diet for athletes and for people of the society also. Personally, I've been a vegetarian for the last decade, over a decade now, and I look much, much healthier now than what I used to look before. I'm more fit, with more energy. I look happier. Let me tell you, if you're a vegetarian, make sure you look healthy. If you don't look healthy, don't say you're a vegetarian, okay? We don't want bad publicity. A balanced, healthy diet should contain between 20 to 30 acidity-forming foods and 70 to 80% alkalinity-forming foods. That's in order to actually create a balance in your diet. Okay, a diet that is providing you with energy, with nutrients, and at the same time, it doesn't give you a side effect of it. So it requires a 20 to 30% of acid-forming foods and a 70 to 80% of alkalinity-forming foods. And we're just going to give a list, first of all, of the alkalinity-forming foods and what are they. So we got a lemon, we got green leafy vegetables, normal vegetables, fruit, almonds, millet, lima beans, sesame seed, buckwheat, Brazilian nuts, other seeds, oil, and honey. Isn't that interesting? All that we need from the alkalinity forming foods, we need 70 to 80%, and all of them are vegetarian products. What about the acidity forming foods? All right, we're going to have a list of foods or substances that human beings decide to take into their bodies first. And we are going to write them down in red first. And the reason being, you will find out very quickly, is because I do not necessarily recommend those foods to be part of the 20 to 30% acidity-forming foods for your body. So the first one is sugar. Second one is meat. Third one is cheese. Now, I want to stop here for a second. I just need to mention something in regards to cheese. The acidity-forming foods, in general terms, mucus-forming foods, okay? Either it is not well known if it is actually a reaction from the body when we consume these substances, or they are the substances themselves that cause the mucus, okay? So there is a debate going on at the moment if it's either the foods that cause it or the foods themselves that bring them in, this mucus forming. But for instance, in terms of asthma, you don't want to have much of these acidity-forming foods because in one way or another, you ended up with a lot of mucus in your body, which actually makes your asthma grow worse. But cheese might be one of the highest mucus-forming ingredients in the Western society. It generates mucus. It's very hard to digest, especially the mature cheeses. Okay? And I'm just going to mention a comment to you found in this book, Counsels on Diet and Food, that says, cheese should never be introduced into the stomach. It is wholly unfit for food. The effect of cheese is debilitating. So we got caffeine also. It's fairly acidic. We've got alcohol also. Now, it's very difficult to pick up a 20 to 30% of your diet if you don't want to use none of those things, because you still got tobacco, and you cannot really eat on those things. So what's the alternative? Well, we got grains, legumes, and nuts. They are actually acidity-forming foods: legumes, grains, and nuts. And there's a reason why I wrote them down in white and not in red. It's because those are the ones that we actually recommend to be part of the 20 to 30% that get united with the 70 to 80% of all the vegetables, of all the fruits, of all the other nuts and grains like the millet or the quinoa. Now, let me just mention a few things from that group: the grains, the legumes, and the nuts. Grains and legumes, they need to be cooked well. Lately, we are having an increased number of people with allergies to certain grains. First of all, we have been abusing the consumption of wheat. And secondly, we haven't been able to cook the grain thoroughly as we should be cooking the grains. The grains need to be cooked in such a way that it's a slow cook but long time, because they are complex carbohydrates, and the body cannot assimilate as such complex carbohydrates unless they have been cooked, or in other words, they have been transformed through cooking into simple carbohydrates. The bread that you eat should be sweet, not because you add in sugar like the one from the shopping center. It's because you have been cooking it long enough to actually break the complex carbohydrates and transform them through cooking into some simple carbohydrates. So make sure that your breads and your grains, your rice, etc., if you can soak it, if you're going to make a rice, you can actually soak it overnight or soak it for 4 hours and then cook it. If they soak first and then cook lighter, it's slow cooking for the longer you can cook it for, or it's required, the healthier and the better assimilation your body will have on those foods. Okay? The legumes, the same thing. They are actually dormant seeds that they need soaking. What we do in our house is this. My wife might actually get 2, 3, 4 kilos of chickpeas, and it soaks the whole 4 kilos at once. We only 5 in the house. We are not going to sit down on the table and eat 5 kilos of chickpeas. But my wife just puts the chickpeas to soak, soaks the chickpeas overnight, changes the water, rinse the chickpeas, and fills up the bowl again with water and soaks them again, at least 2 to 3 times. And you might say, oh, that's a lot of work. Well, relatively speaking, no. Because at the end of the 3rd time of soaking, what she does is she rinses all that, she puts about half a kilo of chickpeas in individual bags and places them in the freezer. So when she decides to cook chickpeas, she doesn't need to soak anything, because she has already 5 kilos of soaked chickpeas in the freezer. She just gets a bag out and cooks them. Okay? So this is actually a time-efficient way of soaking your legumes. And the nuts. Some people, they just get too excited with the nuts, and they become nuts. Nuts should be taken with caution, because technically speaking, they have what I call the temperance shell around it. Nowadays, you go to the supermarket, you can buy a whole kilo of almonds already cracked. So you sit down and you start eating handfuls of them. You wouldn't eat that many if you actually have to crack each individual of them. In fact, God has actually put around them a temperance barrier, which is the shell. So make sure that you're eating your nuts and your seeds with a temperance mentality. Okay? Don't abuse the nuts. we don't actually need that much protein. We do need protein for the rebuilding of the muscle and the healing of the muscle and build up of the muscle, especially because you have already started to do exercise after seeing the exercise section. But you don't need more than 15% the most of protein, okay? And in fact, you don't need that much fat as nuts are bringing. You need in your diet an average to 5 to 10% fat content in your diet, okay? So you don't need that much nuts. You still need them, but not that much, okay? So 20 to 30 acidity forming foods, 70 to 80 alkalinity forming foods, all of them can be under the label of vegetarian diet. Grains, legumes, and nuts are the logical recommended alternative to make up the 20 to 30% of acidity forming foods. Again, I'm saying this. If you are a vegetarian, you have to make sure that you look healthy, that when people are looking at you, your face is shining. If you are not shining, you have to look back to the principles of health and wonder where are you lacking, or what principle hasn't been followed properly, okay? I'm just going to go back to the slide before, when we had the list there. With the acid-forming foods, we just gone back one step. Let's say that you are a vegetarian that uses pasta, which is grains, pasta, cheese, cheese, pasta, pasta, cheese, cheese, pasta, pasta, cheese. I have to tell you, you're not a vegetarian. You're a pasta, cheese person. You are on a different label, okay? In fact, if you go from pasta, cheese, ice cream, now, technically speaking, yes, you're not eating meat, but you're not a vegetarian under the laws of health. And eventually, you won't look healthy, and you won't be the best ambassador for vegetarianism in the world, okay? So, moving forward again to the next section.